Rain tapped softly against the wide hospital windows, a steady rhythm that seemed to echo the dull ache in Rachel Carter's chest. She sat in a rigid plastic chair, shoulders hunched forward, hands clenched in her lap. Her fingers trembled. She wasn't sure if it was from the cold of the hospital's air conditioning or from the weight of what she feared was coming. She stared at the grey tile floor, barely blinking, barely breathing, as the door in front of her clicked open. Dr. Manning stepped out, clipboard in hand, eyes already heavy with the kind of look she'd come to dread, sympathy, but distant, professional. Rachel stood automatically, her knees almost buckled, but she straightened herself quickly. Behind the doctor, her husband Brian followed out, tall, crisp in his usual charcoal suit, but cold, distant. He didn't reach for her hand, didn't look at her. Same as before, the doctor said quietly. We'll run a final round of tests, but there hasn't been much change. Rachel opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came. Brian didn't wait. Maybe it's time you admit that something's wrong with you, he said flatly, adjusting the sleeve of his jacket. We've wasted enough time. The words landed like stones in her stomach. Rachel's mouth went dry. She turned to him, searching his face, looking for anything. Softness, frustration, confusion, but there was nothing. Just calculation. I'm doing everything I can, Brian, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Brian exhaled through his nose. I need a legacy, Rachel, not a barren marriage. He walked ahead, already pulling out his phone, texting someone with the kind of ease that made her stomach twist. Later that night, the storm outside had deepened, thunder growling in the distance. Rachel sat at the edge of their bed, still in her hospital clothes, staring at a picture on the dresser, one from their wedding day. She looked so happy, so certain. Brian came in, dropped his keys on the table, and stood in front of her. I'm leaving, he said, without build-up. She blinked. What? I've been seeing someone. Her name's Candice. She's younger. We're aligned on what we want. She can give me a family. Rachel's heart dropped. You're leaving me? Just like that? I stayed longer than I should have, he said casually. I wanted to believe we'd figure this out, but it's not working. I need something more. He walked to the closet, grabbed a bag he had already packed. Rachel realized in that moment he had planned this, maybe for weeks, maybe months. Brian, we can get help. We can... No, Rachel. He zipped the bag shut. This is done. He didn't look back as he walked out. The front door closed with a soft, final click. Rachel sat frozen in place, hands clenched in her lap again. The rain outside now a full storm. The photo of their wedding stared back at her from across the room, mocking her. Everything she thought she knew about her life had unraveled in a single day. There was a time Rachel Carter believed in forever. She remembered the sunlight pouring through the trees that afternoon, the sound of laughter, clinking glasses, the promises made beneath an arch of white roses. Brian had held her hand tightly at the altar, eyes full of certainty. No matter what, he'd said, voice trembling with emotion. You and me, always. She had believed him, every word. Back then, Rachel was an up-and-coming interior designer with a promising client base and a growing reputation. But when Brian got into law school, they made a joint decision. She'd put her career on hold and support him. While he stayed up late poring over casebooks, she worked 2 part-time jobs, cooked, managed the bills, and kept them afloat. She believed in sacrifice, believed they were building something together. When Brian graduated and opened his first small practice, she celebrated him. When he landed his first major client, she was there, planning the office layout, bringing in modern pieces to impress his partners. Everything they had, the house, the reputation, the image, had her fingerprints all over it. Not that anyone ever acknowledged that. The pressure to have children began almost immediately after the wedding. At first, it was subtle. An aunt's comment at Thanksgiving, a friend's baby shower where Brian squeezed her hand and said, maybe soon. Then came the doctor visits, the tests, the questions. Rachel did them all. Blood work, hormone levels, scans. Every result was inconclusive. Nothing said she couldn't have children, but nothing proved she easily could, either. That was enough for Brian to decide she was the problem. I just don't understand why it hasn't happened, he'd mutter after each disappointing test cycle, his voice laced with blame even when he tried to sound supportive. Are you sure you're doing everything right? His mother, Elaine, only made it worse. Cold and controlling, she took every opportunity to belittle Rachel. Candace's sister just had her second child, she'd mention at family dinners, giving Rachel a thin smile. Some women just bloom early. Or, more bluntly, a woman who can't give her husband a child. What use is she really? Brian never defended her. He changed the subject or sit silently, while Rachel forced a smile and swallowed the sting. The only person Rachel could truly talk to was Jasmine, her best friend since college. Jasmine had always been the fire to Rachel's softness, blunt, loyal, and unafraid of hard truths. "You're not the problem, Rach," Jasmine said one night over wine. "Have you considered IVF or therapy? This is eating you alive." Rachel had. She had read every article, every blog post. But Brian shut it down. "I don't want anything artificial," he said once, almost disgusted. If it's not natural, it's not right. It wasn't about what they wanted. It was about what he wanted, what his mother wanted, what society expected. Now the house she had so carefully designed, every shade of paint, every soft pillow, every family photo arranged just so, felt like a graveyard. Quiet, cold, lifeless. Rachel walked through the living room one morning, bare feet brushing against the rug they had bought on their anniversary trip. She touched the arm of the sofa where they once curled up to watch movies. Now, it was just her, the silence, and a dull ache that refused to leave. She'd stopped crying, not because it didn't hurt anymore, but because she felt like she'd cried everything out. But she wasn't done. Not yet. That afternoon she made an appointment. One more test. No pressure. No expectations. Just her. For herself. No Brian. No Elaine. No eyes watching her like a broken machine. As she hung up the phone and stared at the confirmation message, she realized something. For the first time in years, she was doing something purely for herself. Not to save a marriage, not to meet anyone's expectations. Just Rachel. Maybe there was still something left to fight for. The new clinic felt different, warmer, more personal. No judgmental stares, no rushed appointments. Just calm, clean light, and gentle voices that asked how she was feeling. Not just physically, but emotionally. Dr. Angela Moreno was a quiet woman with kind eyes and a clinical precision that made Rachel feel, for once, safe, in control. She underwent everything: blood panels, ultrasounds, hormone tracking. Dr. Moreno insisted on being thorough. Rachel appreciated that. It gave her something to focus on, something outside of heartbreak. A week passed, then another. While Rachel waited for the results, the world outside didn't slow down. One evening, as she scrolled through her phone to silence the loneliness, she froze. There it was, a photo of Brian and Candace at a vineyard, arms wrapped around each other, kissing. Her eyes dropped to the caption, "Real love, real future," a knife to the gut. Comments flooded in from friends, colleagues, even his mother. "So happy for you both. Candace is glowing. You deserve happiness, Brian." Rachel turned off her phone and sat on the floor, breath caught in her chest. Real love? Was their marriage fake? A joke? Had Candace been there all along? She wanted to scream, but there was nothing left in her throat. No sound, just a low burn of betrayal settling deeper into her ribs. A few days later, Rachel sat across from Dr. Moreno in the consultation room. A file lay open on the desk between them. "Rachel," the doctor began gently, "I've gone over your results." Rachel tensed, preparing herself for bad news. A diagnosis, a label, a confirmation of the failure Brian had so confidently assigned to her. But Dr. Moreno smiled softly. "Your reproductive health is excellent." Rachel blinked. "What? There's no medical reason based on all the testing why you wouldn't be able to conceive naturally." Rachel stared, stunned. "But all the years of trying, the tests, the stress, they said it was me." Dr. Moreno's expression shifted slightly, less comforting now, more careful. "I noticed something odd when I reviewed the file your previous doctor sent over, specifically your husband's semen analysis." Rachel's heart thudded. "What about it?" Dr. Moreno turned the monitor so Rachel could see. "The previous results show a profile that doesn't align with someone of his reported health background. I did some back-checking. The specimen was submitted under his name, but the genetic markers don't match what I'd expect from his patient file. I can't say this definitively, but it's possible that the sample submitted wasn't his." Rachel's pulse rang in her ears. "What are you saying?" she asked, her voice low, shaking. Dr. Moreno leaned forward. "It may be that the semen sample was switched, either misattributed or intentionally submitted by someone else." The words didn't fully register at first. Rachel felt like she was floating out of her body, trying to piece it together. Brian had insisted for years that the issue was hers. He had refused to redo the test, refused IVF, refused further questions. And now, this. He had lied. He had blamed her, isolated her, let his family insult her, all while knowing, or at least suspecting, that he might have been the one with the issue all along. Rachel stared at the test results, then back at the photo still seared in her mind. Brian kissing Candace, promising a real future. She sat silently for a moment, processing. Then something shifted. Not rage, not sadness, clarity. Rachel couldn't sleep that night. The doctor's words echoed like a drumbeat inside her skull. He faked it. Every insult, every cold night in bed, every snide remark from Elaine. She had carried the weight of infertility alone. And now, there was a crack in the lie. She went to the garage the next morning and pulled down an old box from the top shelf. Inside were folders, marriage documents, tax record, insurance forms, and tucked beneath them, a slim envelope labeled fertility records. Brian. She laid everything out on the kitchen table. Dates, lab reports, scribbled notes in her own handwriting. But one document stood out, a semen analysis result with an unfamiliar lab logo, no physician's signature, no lab stamp, just a typed summary and a black and white chart. Her hands trembled. She called Jasmine. Within an hour, Jasmine arrived with coffee and her laptop. You said it looked off. Let's verify it. Together, they combed through emails and scanned the report into a medical verification site. Jasmine, who once dated a nurse, knew how to cross-check lab registry numbers. That's when they saw it. The lab code didn't exist. The address on the report, a commercial complex that housed a real estate agency and a print shop. Rachel's mouth went dry. He made this up? Jasmine's face hardened. Or paid someone to. Rachel sat back in her chair, staring into the distance. All these years. All the crying in bathrooms. The baby showers she had to smile through. The guilt. The therapy sessions where she questioned if she was broken. She felt heat rise in her chest. He knew, she whispered. He knew it wasn't me. They made more calls. Rachel dialed the old clinic where Brian supposedly had his original test. She didn't give her name, just posed as someone verifying a test submitted under his identity. The nurse on the line checked twice. There's no record of a completed sample under that name, the nurse confirmed. He did come in for a consultation, but no follow-up labs were recorded. Rachel's grip tightened on the phone. Thank you, she said, voice shaking. Jasmine stared at her. That's it. You've got your proof. But Rachel wasn't done. Something in her gut told her there was more. And it wasn't just the fertility lie. She dug through social media, email, old calendar entries. A photo from last year showed Candace. She'd been at the firm's Christmas party. In the background of another, Candace and Brian stood close, sharing a laugh at a summer barbecue, dated 4 months before the breakup. Rachel's fingers hovered over the screen. She remembered that night. Brian had told her he was too tired to go. Her hands moved faster now. She found Candace's profile and clicked through, and there it was. A soft gender reveal post, blue confetti exploding in the air, dozens of comments from co-workers and family. She's glowing! Brian's going to be the best dad! Except, a comment from Candace's cousin caught her eye. Crazy how fast things happen when it's meant to be. Didn't even think she'd keep it after that mess with Drew. Rachel froze. Drew. She clicked on the cousin's profile and searched the name. 2 clicks later, Rachel found Candace tagged in a picture with a tall man in a police academy uniform, Drew Washington, dated just over 3 months ago, the same week Brian had filed for divorce. Rachel stared at the timeline. If Candace was 2 months pregnant now, the math didn't add up. Unless the baby wasn't Brian's. She called Jasmine immediately. The baby's not his. Jasmine sounded stunned. What? I think she was seeing someone else too. The cousin slipped up in a comment. If this is true, Brian left me, lied about infertility, cheated, and is parading someone else's pregnancy as his new beginning. Jasmine was quiet for a beat, then said firmly, you deserve the truth, and he deserves consequences. Rachel looked around her quiet home, the walls she had painted, the nursery she had never finished, the life she had poured herself into, only to be discarded like she was nothing. She wasn't going to seek revenge, but she wasn't going to be silent either. That night, she met with a lawyer, a woman named Cynthia Rivera, who specialized in family law and emotional abuse cases. Cynthia listened without interrupting, then said softly, You've got a potential case here. Spousal deception, psychological manipulation. If his infidelity and medical fraud can be established, you may be entitled to damages. Rachel nodded, her hands still. I don't want to destroy him, she said. I just want the truth to exist outside my pain. Cynthia smiled gently. Then we'll make it so. As she walked home under the dim streetlights, Rachel felt the first real thing she'd felt in months. Not closure, not strength, but control. The cafe was quiet, dimly lit, almost too elegant for what Rachel was about to do. She sat by the window in a navy blue blouse and blazer, the sealed folder resting on the table like a bomb. Brian walked in, crisp in a tailored suit, flashing that smug, rehearsed smile. Rachel, he said, like nothing had happened. Good of you to meet. He didn't bother to ask how she was. I have the final paperwork, she said, sliding a manila envelope across the table. But before you sign anything, we need to clear a few things up. Brian raised an eyebrow, already annoyed. Rachel, this doesn't have to be dramatic. We've both moved on. Rachel folded her hands. Have we? He leaned back. Look, I'm trying to build something new, with someone who wants what I want. A family. Rachel stared at him for a long moment, then opened the folder and began pulling out pages, one by one. Medical report, date stamped, verified by an accredited OB-GYN. Brian looked down at the document. What is this? My fertility results, she said coolly. Turns out, I'm in perfect reproductive health. Always have been. He blinked, then scoffed lightly. Rachel, come on. We both know it wasn't that simple. Sometimes it's stress, or timing, or... She slid the next document forward. Clinic confirmation. You never submitted a sample. You faked the test. And this, she tapped a third sheet, is a notarized statement from the lab that supposedly issued your result. The address leads to a print shop. Brian's face lost its color. He sat forward. You went digging through all that. Why? Because you let me believe I was broken, she said, her voice rising just a notch. You turned my body into the scapegoat for your lies. You let your mother humiliate me, let me go through test after test while you slept with your assistant. He glanced toward the window. It wasn't like that. I was under pressure. My practice was drowning. I didn't want to hurt you. Rachel laughed, dry and bitter. You didn't want to hurt me. You annihilated me. But I guess that's easier than facing your own flaws, right? Brian's shoulders stiffened. This is just you being angry. You'll feel better once this is all done. She leaned in. It's not done. He frowned. What do you mean? Rachel pulled out one final envelope. I had a P. I run a timeline. Candace's pregnancy announcement doesn't line up. In fact, she's not even carrying your child. He blinked rapidly. What? I have text messages, photos, and a paternity report that confirms she was already 2 months along when you left me. The father is someone else. His name is Drew Washington. Brian's mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. As if on cue, the cafe door creaked open. Candace walked in, her eyes locking on Brian, then Rachel, then the papers on the table. Drew, she whispered. Brian turned sharply, completely caught off guard. Candace, what are you doing in here? She took another step forward. You told me she was obsessed, that she made everything up. Rachel stood up calmly, collecting her documents. She turned to Candace. You might want to talk about timelines. Looks like you were both lied to. Candace's jaw tightened. She looked at Brian with a kind of dawning horror. Is any of this true? Brian stammered, trying to regain control. I was trying to protect us. Candace let out a short, humorless laugh and walked back out without another word. Rachel looked at Brian, now completely undone, shoulders slumped, face pale, silence swallowing his once confident stance. She placed one final document in front of him. It bore a court seal. Notice of intent to sue, emotional damages, medical deception, spousal fraud. My lawyer will be in touch. Brian's eyes widened. You're suing me. I'm holding you accountable, she said. You didn't just leave me. You broke me to justify your guilt. He tried to speak, but she raised a hand. I'm not broken, Brian, but you might be. With that, Rachel turned and walked out into the cold afternoon sun. No tears, no hesitation, just the sound of her heels against the floor and the fading image of a man finally facing the truth. The fallout came faster than Rachel expected. 2 weeks after serving Brian the legal notice, his law firm announced he was being placed on administrative leave. The Internal Ethics Board was investigating the allegations tied to his misconduct, not just personal, but professional. It turned out he had misused firm time and resources to coordinate personal affairs, and Rachel's case only cracked the surface. Candace packed up and left their shared apartment shortly after. Word spread that she confronted him in front of his colleagues, her voice echoing through the office halls. She told a friend of Rachel's later, "He never loved me. I was just a way for him to escape the truth." Rachel didn't celebrate his downfall. She didn't need to. The closure came in waves, not from seeing him fall, but from watching herself rise. It started small, redoing the living room, then a full kitchen remodel, then a client referral from Jasmine turned into 3 more. Her design business, once shelved to support Brian's career, slowly reignited. She rebranded it, Carter Spaces, and gave it the tagline, "Where Rebuilding Begins." A local home magazine reached out for a feature after seeing her transformation of a dated townhouse into a warm, sun-drenched haven. They loved the story behind her resurgence. She agreed to the interview. This time, she didn't hide behind modesty. She told the truth. "I was married. I believed in us. But when it fell apart, I realized the pieces weren't lost. They were mine to rearrange." Not long after that article came out, she received an unexpected message. Ethan Parker, an old college friend. He had been the quiet, thoughtful architecture student who used to sit beside her in studio classes, sketching while listening to jazz. They'd lost touch after graduation. He'd seen the article and reached out. "Looks like you're still creating beauty. Would love to grab coffee and talk shop." They met at a cafe downtown. Rachel wore a navy blue wrap dress, the same shade as the blazer she wore during that final meeting with Brian. But now, she wore it differently, confidently. Ethan was warm, funny, attentive, and completely uninterested in who she had been with. He admired who she was now. They talked business, swapped design philosophies, and slowly began working on a joint residential project for a couple expecting their first child. The long hours turned into dinners, dinners into laughter, laughter into something Rachel hadn't felt in a long time, comfort. Not the rushed kind that comes from filling a void, but the kind that grows from mutual respect. Still, she was careful. She told Ethan early on, "I'm rebuilding and I don't want to rush anything." He smiled. "Let's build slowly then, like anything worth keeping." Rachel still had scars, nights where echoes of the past crept in, but she also had strength, the kind born not just from survival, but from choosing herself over and over again. One evening, she stood in her newly redone living room, warm light pouring in from the sconces she installed herself. A photo of her and her design team sat on the bookshelf. Across the room, blueprints from her latest project were spread on the table. She wasn't waiting anymore, not to be chosen, not to be healed. She was already there. 1 year later, the Carter name meant something different. Rachel stood in the middle of her sister's nursery, barefoot on the soft woven rug, sunlight dancing through pale yellow curtains she had personally hemmed. The room was everything she wished she had once felt: safe, loved, intentional. She picked up her baby niece, Lila, who cooed softly, nestling against her shoulder. Rachel smiled, swaying gently, inhaling the lavender scent from the tiny onesie. Her phone buzzed. She shifted Lila to one arm and checked the screen. A new client, a fertility clinic. The message read, "We've seen your work. We're opening a new branch and want the patient lounge to feel like home. Can we talk?" Rachel looked around the nursery. Hand-painted animal prints lined the walls. The rocking chair in the corner had belonged to their mother. Everything here spoke of hope. And now, she would bring that same hope to other women walking the path she once knew too well. She walked to the window, the baby now asleep in her arms. Outside, a breeze stirred the trees. Rachel's reflection in the glass wasn't the same woman who had once been broken by silence and blame. Her voice, calm and grounded, echoed in her mind. "I used to think motherhood defined me. Then I realized, I define me." She kissed her niece's forehead, set her gently in the crib, and turned off the light. As she walked out of the nursery, the camera lingered for a moment on the soft light, the quiet grace of the room, and the woman who left it not as a victim of loss, but as an architect of her own rebirth. Rachel Carter was no longer waiting to be chosen. She was already whole. Hi besties, thank you so much for watching to the end. Please remember to like, comment and subscribe.